Hello, listeners. It's Mallory Wilsey, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network, and I want to tell you about another show on our podcast network that I think you'll love. Visionary Voices, the College President's Playbook, is an insightful podcast dedicated to the strategic minds leading today's higher ed institutions. Each episode brings a unique perspective from visionary and tech-forward college presidents, chancellors, and other high-level academic leaders, diving into the complexities and nuances of running a modern educational institution. This show is hosted by Dr. Brian Gross, Vice President for Enrollment Management and Athletics at Hartwick College, and is a valuable resource for current and aspiring leaders in academia, offering a playbook of visionary ideas and practical solutions for the ever-evolving landscape of higher ed. New episodes drop every other Wednesday, and you can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Visionary Voices wherever you get your podcasts.
I think, especially for new or younger hiring managers, it's really easy to be attracted to people that are like yourself because that's who we want to work with. And I think as supervisors and team leaders, we have to intentionally seek out those that are different or those that we know when we're supervising are going to stretch us, they're going to push us, and may not be the person that we want to pick that's going to be your work bestie, but it's someone that's going to, enrich and bring more to our team.
Welcome to Mission Admissions, a podcast that helps higher ed become better recruiters, communicators, marketers, and leaders. I'm your host, Jeremy Tiers, and every other week I'll share my candid conversations with industry leaders and difference makers from both inside and outside of higher ed. You'll walk away with advice, tips, and strategies to help you both professionally and personally. Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com. Hey everybody, it's Jeremy Tiers, and this is episode 43 of the Mission Admissions podcast. And I'm really excited about this episode for a couple of reasons. One, this is the first time I've ever actually had two guests join me. And second, both Jennifer and Aaron, who I'll introduce you to momentarily, are just amazing people and what I would call OGs in the higher ed space. So they bring a ton of knowledge and experience. Thank you both for being here today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So I met Aaron and Jen in person at GPACAC, MOACAC last month in Kansas City. And they both led a session just around leadership in terms of hiring processes, firing processes, building a culture. Like, what does that all look like? And I thought it was such a thought-provoking and interesting session that I wanted to bring bits and pieces of it to the pod today. And so, Jen, we're about to enter this time of year when most colleges and universities will ultimately end up hiring one or multiple new team members. When you're looking through resumes, because I know you've done this before, what are some of the things that you found tend to indicate, okay, this may be a higher quality applicant that I need to focus on a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Jeremy, one of the things that sticks out most seems so basic, but man, just the simple attention to detail in terms of how they've edited this resume, a well-written cover letter, especially if that cover letter is tailored to one of my positions and the role that they'll be doing. I love just sort of seeing those details. In addition to that, too, I think it kind of depends on whether or not we're looking at someone that's got some prior professional experience versus a recent graduate. And so kind of looking at some different things there. If it's a recent alum, I love seeing that they've been involved on campus so that they can speak to just campus activities and what their involvement looked like, things like that. And then I think, too, the last thing I'll add here, we've been loving lately some mid-career changes. And so as we're seeing, in particular, I have 3 team members right now that are all moms with kiddos in college. And so they have one of which came to us by way of her son going through this process, and then just basically said, I think I would love this. And I think this job is interesting. And so we had a conversation, and we now have 3 of those in our office. And so it's been really neat to see the success that some of these mid-career mom changes have made, and how they're really doing great things within our office too.
Yeah, I think what I would add on top of what Jennifer just laid out for you, we really look for flexibility. And by flexibility, I mean, the question we get from a lot of apps is that, what does a typical day look like in admissions? And there is no typical day. So I really think it's great if you can see a club or organization for a recent grad or someone with experience that you can actually see there's flexibility in their resume, that they're able to switch gears and drop what they're doing and pick up another project, because that's something that it's hard to teach, I feel like. And if they have some of that under their belt, that's going to be a really quick inside track to kind of feeling comfortable in this role.
And do either of you feel like, Jen, you alluded to this, hey, we've got some of this type of, staff members on our team right now in this group, and we might not have any, for example, moms who just went through the process. And so it would be a nice mix with what we already have. How much of then do you think hiring a lot of times is more based on, well, what do we already have? And like, who would be a good fit within this team versus, well, that's just kind of more of the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially for new or younger hiring managers, it's really easy to be attracted to people that are like yourself, because that's who we want to work with. And I think as supervisors and team leaders, we have to intentionally seek out those that are different from us, or those that we know when we're supervising are going to stretch us, they're going to push us. It may not be the person that we want to pick that's going to be your work bestie, but it's someone that's going to, enrich and bring more to our team. And so absolutely, we're looking for that balance. But that balance also has to come with the position that's open. And so when we're hiring campus-based positions, we hire a lot of recent alums because they're just graduating here from school in Stillwater. They may want to stick around for a couple extra years. Whereas if I'm going to hire a regional out in California, I'm really looking for someone that has that prior work experience, either within admissions or within a corporation that knows the territory. And so we're sort of tend to be looking for some different things there to help us sort of achieve that balance.
Yeah, I think another angle that is important to consider is from the customer service side. So we can visualize what a large-scale open house looks like, and we know that students and parents are not cookie cutters. So we don't want cookie cutter staff members. And so we are thinking about what type of students and families would applicant A interact with best versus B that might have a different skill set. And so, if you're looking at students that have marching band experience or fine arts experience, well, we know that those are the type of applicants that are going to connect with some of those students that are in kind of that same ring of interest as well. So yeah, we look at it from a customer service side of wanting to have a diverse team that are going to be able to connect with lots of different types of students and parents as well.
Well, and you both hit on something there, and I feel like I've been having this conversation a lot with senior level leaders who have been hiring, obviously, over the last couple of years. My thought is, and I'd love to get your thoughts, both of you, on this. My thought is it's a lot easier for you to teach somebody all the things they need to know about, Aaron, in your case, the University of Missouri, Jen, in your case, Oklahoma State, than it is, can you actually get somebody you've just met to actually feel comfortable around you and start to talk to you, right? Like those soft skills, I feel like, are a little bit harder to teach or to get most people to become good at if they're not already good at it. So on that note, do you think that there's this notion of in higher ed, gosh, we have to hire somebody who went to Missouri or Oklahoma State? Like that's going to be where our best candidates are? And
yeah, admittedly, for years, that's kind of where our team leaned, is we wanted Mizzou experience, because we know that when our reps are in high schools or in front of parents, those individuals typically want to hear the Mizzou story. We, over the past few years, have been very intentional about hiring the best candidate who wasn't a Mizzou grad, but they maybe knew a specific territory as a regional rep, or they brought some really great experience as a recent grad, that they could learn the Mizzou culture. And what we have found is they all worked out really well. They didn't need that Mizzou experience to be able to tell a Mizzou story. I joke that, if you listen to my stories, they're 19 years old. And so that's probably not what a 17 or 18-year-old wants to hear anyway. And so I think it's way more important for us to stay connected to the current students on campus and get those stories as opposed to trying to lean on our own personal stories.
I think Aaron brings up a really great point there, because sometimes when we hire recent alums or alums of the institution, they tend to fall back on only their stories and their peer group. And while those are great to a certain extent, sometimes it hinders the growth because they feel like they know everything already, just basically alluding to their experience there. I love Aaron's point about his 19-year-old stories. I always joke we're kind of like Matthew McConaughey in admissions, where we keep getting older, but the students we work with stay the same age. And so, yes, my story is age and my experience is very different, so I can't fall back on those things. But it is, I think some of the harder things to teach are the professional polish, and having an individual that can get up in front of an open house of 600, 800 people, present well, be articulate. I can teach them the things to say, but if you're not confident and open to being able to do that, that is really challenging. And then I think on the flip side of this too, Jeremy, you brought this up, is just those individuals that are going to be that type of person that's going to reach out to students and families and build that relationship, be able to quickly establish rapport, whether it's 30 seconds at the college fair table, and then sort of cultivate that relationship over the life cycle of the student too. That is a really hard skill to teach. And that doesn't mean we hire all extroverts. And so I think that's had to be a pivot for us too. You don't have to be the person that always wants to be around people, because some of our greatest admissions counselors are those introverts that know how to turn it on in front of people, but then recharge on their own solo. And so I think that's important too.
Jen, what's your favorite interview question to ask somebody when you're going through the process?
So I have two. And I think both of them sort of get to just really sort of the personality, what people are proud of. And so the first one is, what professional or personal accomplishment are you most proud of? And it's really fun, I think, when you've got a candidate that's really nervous, and everyone likes to talk about themselves. And so I think flipping that to thinking about what are you most excited about, you can kind of see a little bit of this passion point and just see some real pride in people. So that's always a fun one. And then the other one I like asking too is, tell me about your favorite job and why. And what's always striking to me is I think we see a lot of individuals that'll drum up sort of that first job experience or something that they really enjoyed. And I think as they're talking about it, same thing, it's seeing that passion and that excitement about what are the things that they enjoy doing with that. And hopefully I can kind of connect it to the job that we'll ask them to do there too. But I think just seeing a candidate get excited about what they enjoy most tend to be some of my favorites.
Aaron, I wonder, on what Jen just said there, if it's a younger candidate, for example, that doesn't have previous work experience, or you've got one candidate A who's 45 years old and candidate B is 26, would you ask different kinds of questions of those candidates, or any thoughts on that?
I tend to start the interview by trying to make the candidate as relaxed as they possibly can be, where I really get to see their true personality. So that could be someone who's currently in college, getting ready to graduate. That could be someone who's transitioning in careers, working for another university. And I try to draw on one experience on their resume. That could be a student club. It could be an organization. It could be a job. And I have them walk me through a process that they've done in that role, because we ask them to talk about processes every day, right? Admission requirements, scholarship process, housing process, enrollment steps. So if I can get a part-time cake froster to walk me through how they frost a cake, that has nothing to do with what we're hiring for, but we can also kind of hear how quickly do they get to the answer, how detailed are they in giving that answer. Same thing with student clubs and organizations. You can really kind of draw some really good tidbits about how they're going to discuss certain topics by picking something on their resume and letting them feel very comfortable in their own skin there.
Aaron, as you have audited, because I have to believe both of you have been doing this long enough in your senior leadership roles. So Aaron, I'll start with you. As you've audited your, we'll call it, hiring processes, anything that really sticks out that you've changed significantly? Either, hey, it may have been 5 years ago when you audited, or maybe something.
Yeah, recent. We ask everyone to give a presentation of their choice. And we're being much more clear on what they should and shouldn't present on. We don't want a Mizzou presentation. We know more than they do. And so if they're trying to present on Mizzou, that's not going to be in their best interest, because we will train them on that information. For recent grads, we are starting to suggest dress code for the interview, which again, it's interesting to me, but we know that when they are presenting in front of families or at college fairs, we're going to want them to look a certain way. And so if we don't tell them, we get a really wide range of how people show up. And I think it distracts sometimes from their interview process. And so we're just being a little bit more intentional on telling them kind of what the look should be when they come interview with our team.
Love that. So one of the things that we've looked at within the last, handful of years or so is we used to have a writing sample that we would conclude our interviews with. We would let our candidate know that wasn't something related to OSU, but say you had experienced poor customer service and you need to write an email to the manager explaining the scenario and just responding to it in this way. And we used to set them up with a laptop. They would do it right then and there. And I think as we were going through this process, because we know written communication is really important. And so that's really what we were ultimately trying to get at. What we've realized is that through written communication, you don't really ever have to do a lot of that formal writing on the spot. And so instead, what we've done is we've taken this writing sample and we will now email it to the candidate the night before their interview, and then just tell them that by the end of the next day, they just need to email this back to us. And so we still get at the same thing, but they do have a little more time to think through what would they say, how would they handle it, because as we're getting emails from families and students, we do have a little bit of response time. And so we want our candidates to be, thoroughly thinking through these things. And so we wanted to be able to give them a little more time and space. And so that's been really successful for us. Now add in AI, that may change that whole scenario too. Haven't revisited that yet, but that's at least sort of one of the changes there too. And then I think the other thing that's really important, going back to what Aaron was saying in terms of just setting up a candidate to be successful and comfortable when they arrive, is sort of over communicating the details in terms of telling them where to park, bringing in their parking voucher so that we can validate their parking. We'll pay for that, which doors to enter through. We work on a large campus and we forget how anxiety inducing it is for a candidate to come in, especially if they're not an alum, and know where our office is, how to get to us, things like that on time. And so it tends to help set them up for success too. And if a candidate still struggles with that, sometimes that's a little bit of a red flag too.
I love what you both just shared there, and it really is in the details. And I find that so many people, whether it's somebody who's been doing this 5, 7, 12 years or somebody who's 5 months in, you can really see, we'll call it a high-performing person just by, to both of your points, the little details in terms of how they, prepare. I had my most recent guest, I was recording an episode for an upcoming pod, and she said, "Hey, can I ask you a question?" as we were closing up. And I said, "Yeah, go ahead." She said, "How do you get up in front of 500 people and not get nervous?" And we were just talking about that. And my answer was, a whole bunch of things. But I said, overall, it's preparation. I said, if I was like, cool, I'm just going to kind of wing it and have a few thoughts in my head and just hope it comes out, that's never a good strategy. And so on that note, I'm curious, Jen, I'll start with you. Then in terms of a mistake that you think a lot of leaders make when they actually, okay, we've hired a staff member and now we're going to start this onboarding process. Is there a mistake either that you're comfortable sharing you've made, or somebody there at Oak State, I'm not looking for a name, but has made that you've all had to navigate, or just do you see things as you talk with other colleagues?
I think number one, it's the importance of having a good, robust onboarding plan. So just having that plan, having it set. In a perfect world, we like to have that plan emailed out to our new hire in advance so that they sort of know, here's what the next 3-4 weeks are going to look like for me. All of our offsite staff, in terms of our recruitment staff, we're about half and half in terms of offsite staff versus those that are based here in Stillwater. And so all of our offsite staff will come in and spend at least a week here, sometimes 2. And so being able to let them know in advance, what they can expect with that, I think is really helpful. The other part of that I think is most certainly a mistake that I've made, but I think it's really easy for anyone to make, is just not outlining expectations early enough in terms of professional dress and what it looks like to be here from 8 to 5 and what lunch looks like. And, what do we do and who takes lunch and when, and where do you go? Where do you put your lunch? All of those things that I think just really make for a smooth transition for a new employee, make them feel really welcome. And so being able to start their week with those things. One of the other things that I think that we do really well that's really helpful for candidates is we'll do an 8:30 a.m. check-in every day. And so whomever that person's direct supervisor is, and it's not to be micromanagey, it's just really to help that candidate have some time and space that they feel like they can ask all the questions in terms of where's this building on campus versus how do I get my computer set up in this way, some things like that. And so it's time that's held. And that's really hard as a supervisor because it's a big commitment when you're looking at that daily. But I think it helps set the candidate or your new hire up for success, as well as you as a supervisor too.
Aaron, I know because you manage a team of regionals, right? I'm wondering, is there anything in addition to what Jen said that is different because, again, you're not always face-to-face?
The use of technology. And I know that seems like a really weird thing because you're using technology this morning to do this. But we have regionals that are in 3 different decades of their life. And so trying to make sure that they are on the same page in the world of Zoom and Teams and updating their computer to a new Windows and Outlook and all of that. I also find it fascinating that during the pandemic, technology improved everyone's lives in a lot of ways where people can order food from their phone and they can go to an app and quickly check into something. And the world of higher ed didn't really change that way. So there is a learning curve with a 22-year-old trying to learn our CRMs and how to do things that have been a certain way for a couple decades. And so I think we have to stop and think about when we're working with those people that are remote, they're not able to pop over a wall and ask someone a question. They're needing to check in with someone, and they need to understand that every question about technology is absolutely okay to ask anyone on the team. Because again, it is an ever-changing world that they maybe didn't have to change with because life got easier for them on a day-to-day basis of shopping and ordering food and everything like I mentioned earlier.
Well, and on that point, Aaron, and I'd love to get your feedback on this, and Jen, if you have anything to add, there's no doubt anytime you hire new staff members, there's probably going to be, whether it's an expectation, whether it's a basic, process that they're just not aware of, or maybe doesn't get covered in enough detail, or they don't write stuff down, or there's no document to access. Is there anything, Aaron, that specifically you do with new hires?
I try to lead by example with that. There are obviously, even after 19 years, lots of questions that I don't get on a regular basis. And so there are often times where I get a question, I'm like, I actually don't know the answer to that. And if I can't find it on our websites or I can't Google it and find the answer, that's when I start kind of peppering around the office. And so I make sure if I'm asking questions of others, it is people that have been here longer than me. It is brand new people. It is people in the office. It is people as a regional, because I want everyone else to feel comfortable. Like, oh, Aaron came to me for a question. I can go to him for a question as well. Also, I think there's a lot of value in those regionals asking in-office reps and vice versa questions because they get to stay connected. So we really only get to see each other as a complete team 3 times a year. That's 2 retreat weeks and 1 training week. I'm actually headed over to campus for a retreat week this week. But again, we don't get to see each other that often. So if we can connect through Teams or Zoom and ask each other those questions, I do feel like there's a sense of connectedness of being able to do that. And so I just try to lead by example and ask different people different questions. And if they don't have the answer, no harm, no foul. I'll go to the next person and ask that question again.
Jen, anything you do just with new employees to really let them know, hey, I am, for lack of a better term, here to serve you, and I want you to come talk to me when there's things that aren't clear?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, I think, are pretty intentional with having onboarding sessions at sort of all levels of our organization. And so every new hire will meet with our director. They meet with me as an associate director. Their direct supervisors will be our assistant directors. And sort of that's kind of made clear that avenue is open throughout there. And so I think too, it's finding multiple ways for them to communicate with us, just like what Aaron was saying. We're using Teams a lot in terms of communication. All of our admissions counselors are on a group me. And so some of that is shop talk, in terms of how many campus tour groups are going out today. The other part of it is our team has started an animal of the day where they all post a picture of an animal. And so it's just kind of grown into this weird thing that they all like love and expect to happen. And plus, all the fun stuff that happens on the road. And so I think just kind of immediately sort of embedding them in all of these different channels of communication is really helpful in that way as well.
How did the animal of a day start? I'm curious, Jen. Was that something leadership
No.
started? Well, but is it, or just somebody randomly came in one day and said, "Here's a picture of my cat." Like,
Yes.
what do you have for an
So
animal?
we have an admissions counselor who just loves animals. And there's, I guess you don't really realize how much wildlife is on campus. And so he just started taking pictures of, like, I don't know, we always joke that we have really friendly squirrels on campus, and we joke that they're on payroll. And so it may have started with a squirrel. I can't even remember at this point. But now it's just like random stuff that pops up. And so it's just grown into this thing, but it was absolutely started by an admissions counselor, and everyone else just kind of rolls with it. So they go with it.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times best-selling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I love that, because we're going to get in a little bit here talking about culture. And I feel like those are the kinds of things that just get staff to be that much more tight knit and establish, again, a different kind of culture. I'm curious then, and Jen, I'll start with you. When you do have then new employees coming in, because most years, again, you're going to hire at least one new person, and regardless of their age and years of experience, are there other topics? I mean, Aaron mentioned CRM and technology earlier. Jen, that you find, boy, we have to repeat this like multiple times, or this is a topic that is usually a lot harder for staff, regardless of age and experience, to actually get right away?
Yes. Well, going back to just the CRM technology part of it, that's one thing too that I think has sort of evolved for us, because I think we now have 3 different official onboarding sessions, and we added another one that was slate by admissions counselors for admissions counselors. So instead of our data team just running that session, we actually have one of our admissions counselors that leads that too, in terms of how they use it. And then there's like a follow-up, almost like homework worksheet, mostly because I think as much as I can tell you about a system, until I ask you to go in and find a student's test score and their EFs, it's really hard for our new hires to learn. So we've tried to be intentional, I think, in terms of some of those topics of learning by doing, rather than just me talking at you. The other part of that I think is really important too is just the overall shadowing experience of watching a pre-tour presentation whenever we have campus tours going on, or going out in the high schools and seeing what a high school visit looks like in terms of the things that we're talking about, how we're talking with students, how we pivot based on the audience that we're meeting with. And then really just kind of the whole college fair thing too, is what do I say? How do I get students to interact? What's that conversation look like? What's your elevator speech? And so I think those shadowing opportunities take some time. And we also want to be really intentional in terms of who we're putting our new team members with, so that they're seeing different perspectives. I've got a super gregarious admissions counselor that does reality TV and things like this. And then I have these introverts. And so I need to put these counselors with both, because I can't expect everyone to be this very gregarious person. You've got to be who you are, and you find who you are within that. But it takes sort of those shadowing opportunities, I think, with all different team members in order to get there and find what you're most comfortable with.
Aaron, any other thoughts in terms of, because I know I've had others, including my good friend John McGreal, to talk what is it like to be a regional and how then is it different? Is there anything specifically that you feel like with regionals that you have to have multiple conversations around?
One of the things that regionals probably don't get as often the further you get away from campus is just the repetition. So, we hear one family talking about needing more scholarship money, and that regional wants to talk about like why we should be giving more scholarship money to every out of state student. And so they don't understand the context of why we do things the way we do with our automatic awards. And so it does take some time to let them be heard with what their concern is, and then also kind of give them the institutional knowledge of here is why we've set this up a certain way. Again, that could be admission requirements, that could be how we do the housing process, any of those things. But I just feel like the further you get away from campus, the less often you hear about a topic. So it's just to make sure that they understand, again, kind of that context behind the story of why we do the things we do as an institution.
Aaron, what was the hardest thing? And again, I'm going to make you think back, but what was the hardest thing for you when you started in higher ed to really grasp?
Wow. Honestly, it probably is still true that my institution is not the right fit for every student. And that is me saying, I really wish every student had access to come to Mizzou. And I understand that we need to set students up for success, and we look at retention rates, and we look at all of the indicators on campus to make sure that students are going to be successful. One of the things I struggle with the most is the conversations I have with parents in front of their students when I hear, oh, Johnny's probably not going to be a good business student because he's not great at math. And I am the type that I want to be the champion for the student of, let's let Johnny figure that out on his own. He can come to our campus and he can take advantage of our resources, of the free tutoring and the student success center and all the things. And so I think that's a struggle I've always had, is just wanting every student to be successful. And if Mizzou is the right place for them, I want them to have that opportunity. So that's really hard for me to still kind of wrap my head around sometimes.
I appreciate you being open and sharing that. And Jen, I'd be curious to know, since you've then, on a similar note, moved into a leadership role, anything that's really been difficult for you, and maybe it wasn't necessarily difficult before you got into a leadership role, but leadership continues to be one of the topics that I think I'm probably asked about the most at varying levels. And I'm just curious, anything really challenging for you as a leader, if you're comfortable sharing?
Absolutely. So I always think every step up is a step out. And what I mean by that is sort of your view of the work and the scope that we do just gets broader. And so I think that as I've sort of progressed into these leadership roles, I'm further removed from the front lines of having conversations with students and families on a daily basis. And typically the conversations that I do have with students and families are the really hard ones. And so they're the tough ones. I get the really unhappy families. And so, I think as we're sort of making some decisions as leadership team members, is really making sure that we're still connected with our counselors and, what's happening on the boots on the ground, what's happening in our territories, making sure that we understand, the experience of our team and our admissions counselors and how they're progressing and how they're growing within their careers so that they can better serve our students and our families. And so that takes a lot of effort, and I don't get to spend as much time as I'd like to, but man, I love the times when I can just sit down with our team and talk about what's going on and making sure that I'm understanding that from back when I had a territory, things are different and students are evolving, families are evolving. And so just kind of really making sure that we fully understand that so that we're making informed decisions for our team and our students.
Jen, I'm wondering, this word culture continues to get thrown around a ton, right? Like, what, in your opinion, if somebody said, hey, Jen, give me a couple sentences on what makes a good culture?
In terms of what makes a good culture, I think it's going to be a little bit different for everyone. The thing that I think my team will hear me say the most is we work hard and we play hard. And what I mean by that is we're going to put in all the effort that we can. We're going to do the best that we can. But the play hard is we're going to get that time back. And it's really important for our team to feel valued, that their personal time is just as important than their time in the office. And I think that starts with leadership in terms of me taking my time, whether it's for a vacation, whether it's for just a day where I go get my nails and my hair done, because that's what I need to sort of refresh and rejuvenate myself. But I think us making sure that that's okay for others is really where that starts. And so I think it's sort of creating a culture where we've got similar values that goes back to just sort of the mission and being a land grant institution and what we're doing for students, and making sure that our staff has buy-in and understanding of what that means, so that we're all sort of working towards this collective goal too.
Yeah, I would add that I kind of visualize culture as a core, and there's lots of different ways to kind of to chip at that core from different angles. And so our office created a mission statement several years ago, and we revisit that every few years just to make sure that it's still accurate with our mission and what we do as an office. In December at our retreat, we assigned a book read for every staff member, and it was The Art of the Customer Service of Disney. As a self-proclaimed Disney adult, obviously I was game for it. I think there were some eyes that rolled when they were told they needed to read a book about customer service from Disney's angle. Looking back, it was probably the most vibrant conversations we had. We didn't have enough time to really talk about the book, that there was so much engaging conversation. So that was kind of an interesting way to look at, like, here's why customer service is important to one of the biggest companies in the world. Here's why it's important to Mizzou admissions as well. I also think culture goes to when we are together, we want to feel like we are one. And so we will have an all staff dinner during our retreats and our training weeks, and we have a theme. And so with the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs and everything happening right now, our theme is represent your favorite sports team. So that could be our Mizzou Tigers, or it could be the Indiana Pacers. It could be whoever that they want to support. So that's kind of a fun little culture theme as well. And another one is that we know that we don't see in words all the great work that our teammates do that often. So when we do, we as managers ask our staff to forward those messages to us so that we can send them out to the entire team, so that we can celebrate the excellence that we see. So that could be a campus visit survey, that could be a family from Southern California who is making the trek halfway across the country because of our Southern California rep as well. So lots of examples, but we love to really celebrate our reps when we get really good feedback from families and from students on they're choosing us because of X, Y, Z. And that was a big part of that with the rep that they worked with as well.
You both hit on what I would call as celebrating the small wins there. And as I travel around and work with different admissions and enrollment marketing teams, when I do training or I have conversations with your peers, I don't hear enough leaders telling me they're doing that. And I'm just curious, Jen, I'll ask you, do you think there's a reason why so many leaders, outside of the obvious, right, which is everybody's busy, just don't take the time maybe to do small little fun things like what Erin just shared there?
Yeah, I think that, senior leaders often are not receiving that praise too. And so we forget how valuable it is. And I think when you're advancing into these sort of senior leadership roles, a lot of it is intrinsic motivation, and we just go and we do and we do and we do. And when we're not seeing recognition, we forget how important it is for our teams to receive that. And so it's sort of that taking that moment to stop and to pause and make sure that we are providing that in those reinforcing moments. I do a lot of sending those positive emails, just like what Erin was talking about, all the way up to my vice president, because I know that when things make their way to her, I get bad news, she gets real bad news. And so it's kind of nice to just sort of send those shining moments up too, in the same way that we're managing up and we're managing down. And so stopping to recognize those things. And, even if we're not getting that praise, it's really important for our team members and me. And that's what keeps us going, especially as we kind of approach these, times of high burnout and high stress areas.
What have you been talking about on that note, right? Because burnout, work-life balance, all of it, right? I feel like it continues to come up over and over and over again. Are you having intentional conversations either as a group or individually with staff about like handling burnout, signs that you may be approaching burnout? Are those things, or is it, Jeremy, we don't talk about those things unless either I notice it in a staff member or they bring it to me?
As managers, we closely monitor work schedules to make sure that they're not working 60 hours a week when they obviously don't have to with college fairs or whatnot. So if we see that they have a week full of evening college fairs, we are likely to tell them to flex in and start their day later so that they're not working the normal start time until 10 p.m. when they get home to their family and loved ones. And we don't want that to be the case. So we are closely monitoring to make sure that they're have a healthy work-life balance. I'll be the first to admit my work-life balance is not the healthiest, but it's just the name of the game of me traveling around the country a lot. So an example, last week, I was actually on a flight from Charlotte to Kansas City. And so I quickly sent a Teams message to every regional rep as an individual, not as a team, but as an individual, and just checking with them professionally. What's going on? What are you hearing? How are things going? But also personally, if I knew something was going on in their life, of a young one's birthday party or something coming up, I try to quickly check in with the regional staff as often as I can, so that they know that they are being heard. If I hear some burnout, then that's when I'm likely going to tell them to flex their schedule and take some time off for sure.
And I'm wondering, Aaron, is that something that when you started at Mizzou, senior leadership above you came and said, hey, Aaron, like these are things either A, I'm telling you can do in the right situation, or B, like how does that happen? Meaning, is that culture, if we're going to keep using that word, instilled down on you, or is it something, nope, this is just how I've always done it, Jeremy, and if senior leadership asks me about it, then I'll
That's
share
it's
with them
something that I kind of started on my own. My philosophy has been, since I've been with Mizzou, is that if I can answer an email without looking something up, I will do that all evening long if I have to. But if it's something that's going to take me, digging into PeopleSoft or a CRM to get some answers, then that can wait till the next day. My team also knows that I have to get a lot of things off my desk at nighttime for the next day. So if they get an email, the expectation is not to email me back also. So they know it's with them and they can get back to me within 48 hours, hopefully. But it's not something that they need to drop what they're doing to get back with me as well. So I do make sure that the staff members understand that I may act a certain way, but I don't expect them to act that way in return to get back to me after hours.
And I feel like as we've been talking through today, this idea and concept of setting expectations, right, has come up multiple times, which I love and I think is super important. Jen, I'm wondering, when you have a newer staff member, or maybe, it's somebody who's been doing this 20 years and you just see that huge change where you can tell, okay, this is not going in the direction we want to have. Maybe we do need to have a conversation with them about putting them on a development plan or something along the lines of, hey, like, we've got to make some changes here. How do you as a leader find a way, we'll say, to ease into the conversation of, hey, we need to turn around what we're doing here on your end because this is not either aligned with the mission, or it's like, thoughts on that?
So I think it always starts with a conversation. And what I've always found, that usually on that initial check-in of, Jeremy, tell me how things are going right now, usually they're going to be the first to tell them themselves. And so I think it's surprising at how self-aware most people are. Now, this is not, I would say 9 out of 10 cases, and they could say, I'm struggling, or I'm just not feeling as passionate about this, or, things like that. And then, taking that step further and tell me in what areas you're struggling, what's hard, what's the least favorite part of your job right now, what do you enjoy the most? And I think just sort of in talking through some of those scenarios, letting them sort of get it off their chest is really revealing a lot of times in the same areas where we are having concerns. And so then, once they share those things, then I usually will come in and share from our experience, or I encourage our supervisors to have this conversation and just say, I'm so glad that you brought this up, Jeremy. Here's some of the concerns and some of the things that we're seeing. And, if this behavior continues, we'll have to move forward with a formal performance improvement plan. And so I think just trying to have that conversation initially. I think a lot of times too, as I'm working with our supervisors, as they're working with counselors too, is encouraging them to have the conversation of, how can I help you? And so really involving the supervisor in the process of helping the team member to come along. And so sometimes it's a lack of training. Sometimes it's a lack of, we run into this a lot, of just the ability to manage their time effectively. And so are there things that as a supervisor, we can help you do? I'm always surprised at the number of times that an employee will ask for a more regular check-in just for some accountability. And if they don't ask for that, we're probably going to do it anyways, but it's nice when it's their idea. And so I think just trying to get us through, not feeling like it's all on the employee to make the change happen, but how can we help with that? And that tends to be a good conversation starter too, so that they feel supported.
I really try as much as I can as a supervisor to make sure I'm giving consistent positive feedback. I don't want to be the supervisor that if you hear from me, it's only negative. So I try to give way more positive feedback than I do the negative feedback or the growth plan, because I feel like if you're giving employees the positive feedback, that includes a growth plan. And so you can easily walk them through what needs to change by that positive reinforcement. I also learned something from my executive director, which rings so true now as a supervisor. The number of hugs you see a rep get from moms or dads is kind of in relation to the job well done. And I know not everyone's a hugger, but it is fascinating to go to a yield event around the country and you see mom after mom hug a rep and thank them for the time they had. And so I point those things out to reps as well, is that you're not getting hugs because you did an average job. You are getting hugs because you are the lifeline to the university for that family. And I definitely appreciate seeing that as well. So when I hear feedback from counselors of a rep going above and beyond, helping them out with the junior day panel or anything, I make sure and give that feedback to the reps. And again, I think that just makes those difficult conversations easier when they know that I'm going to give them really good feedback when it's warranted as well.
And then, Aaron, let's just say, to Jen's points, you've been very clear with expectations. You've had conversations. The person's even self-aware enough to know that this is an area they need to get better in. What does, that firing conversation look like? Like, we've gotten to the point where this just isn't working, whether the person is just trying and it's just they're not capable, or you're just to the point to where you can see it's negatively impacting the rest of the team and you just can't continue with this person because of the other trickle-down effects I'll say it's going to have. Like, how do you fire somebody
you're going to probably fall out of your chair when I say this, but in 19 years, I've never actually fired someone. Some of the issues fix themselves. They understand that it's not the best fit for them, and so they make the choice to go elsewhere. I will say that 2 of the worst days I've had in my career, we actually closed 2 of our regional territories and we eliminated jobs of really great humans. And that was a really tough conversation. So that wasn't firing, obviously, for the negative reasons, but to know what that looked like, that was a really difficult time to go through when we just were not seeing the results we needed to in that territory. And it was not to do with either one of those employees. That was a really tough conversation to have. But again, to answer your question directly, I've never had, I'm not going to say the opportunity, the need to fire someone in my 19 years with the University of Missouri.
Well, and Jen, I'd be curious to know, because these are conversations I've had over the last 10 years. I feel like I have a lot of conversations with people and they're like, Jeremy, is it just me, or you travel around all these campuses? Like, higher ed doesn't fire a lot of people at admissions. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really great point. And there are most certainly individuals that we have kept longer than we should. But I think once you get, and this is why I think within an employee's first 90 days, we try and be not overly critical, but really kind of get the employee to think through how they're going to be successful and how they're enjoying the job, because it's much easier to let a person go within the first 90 days. We can then extend it another 90 days after that. And so when we do a 90-day review with an employee, we have certain bullet points that we kind of like a checklist, like, here's what you're doing well, here's what you're going to, what we haven't quite hit yet, but what we're going to work on in the next 90 days. And then we also have bullet points lined out for our expectations for the next 90 days. So we've got a full 6 months that we've got very clear expectations. As team members are either meeting those or not meeting those, they sort of know where they stand, and we're having kind of an open conversation, because once we extend that 90 days, then it's much easier to cut ties with an employee at that point than it is 3, 4, 5 years down when you've got this consistently underperforming employee. When we get to a point where we have someone that's been underperforming for that long, it becomes more of the fault of leadership, I think, than the fault of the employee, because we're just enabling them to do this mediocre job. And so that's what we really have to look at. You're kind of, we've made our bed, you sort of have to lie in it unless you're willing to cut ties at that point. And at that point, you've got to really start the documentation process, especially for a public university, is really intense in terms of letting someone go. But I think of it as, in the same way we talk all the time about our jobs being able to help students find fit, we want to help employees find a great fit for us. And this is not a great job for everyone that comes to us. And even when we have some employees that have worked within the field or the industry of admissions elsewhere, it's not always a good fit at Oklahoma State because we've got different expectations, good, bad, and ugly. But we have to consider some of those things too. It's a hard conversation, but hopefully it's also mutually beneficial, because chances are if we're unhappy with an employee, they are likely unhappy here as well. And so try and kind of, if we ever get to that conversation where we have to talk about firing someone, I've only had one that was just still completely blind to the fact that things were not going well. And that was obviously not a great fit. But other than that, I think people kind of tend to get there on their own.
Kudos to both of you for being so open with me today. I appreciate that. And I think it's going to help a lot of people listening. And, if you're listening to this and you just happen to have been doing this for 7, 8, 9, 19 years like Aaron, and you've had the benefit of never having to fire somebody too, that's awesome. But I think, and I can say this because, if you know anybody listening, even if you don't, Jennifer and Aaron are friends. They know each other very well. And I have no doubt they're bouncing things from a leadership standpoint off of each other throughout the year. Leadership is hard. I mean, that's so obvious. And yet I find that too many leaders are, and I had Sasha Timi from Indiana University on a few episodes ago, and we talked about this. It gets lonely as a leader. And so if you are not relying on other people that you trust, who you feel like can either A, listen, and or B, provide you some level of clarity around an issue you're having, please start doing that, or find people that you can do that with, because we all need those people, whether we have to actually go through firing somebody or it's as simple as setting expectations. I mean, there are schools out there, it still blows my mind, that do not have a strategic enrollment management plan in 2024. There is no document. It doesn't exist. Maybe it's in the VP's head a little bit. Well, then how do you have to start somewhere, right? That's my point. It's not right or wrong. It's just for clarity, for building team culture, for being prepared, for these type of situations. And so leaning on each other, much like I'm sure the two of you have done with each other, I think is something else that I hope people listening today have taken away. I end every episode, Jen and Aaron, the same way. I do something called Fun Rapid Fire. So I'm going to give each of you a couple of quick questions, and I just want some immediate feedback from you,
right.
okay? Jen, dream family vacation spot, where is it?
I would probably tell you at this point, I'd love to take my kids to Europe. And so my 10-year-old is getting really into history and architecture and things like that. And so I'd love for us to all be able to go and experience that together. My 10-year-old is a huge EPL soccer fan. And so to be able to go and see a soccer game, football, there we go, that would blow his little mind. And so it'd be fun to see.
Aaron, Disney ride that you just can't get enough of?
Oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, Cosmic Rewind, without a doubt.
Jen, what's the movie you can watch over and over and over, whether you want to admit it or not?
I don't tend to watch movies over and over a whole lot. Come Christmas time, I love Actually, though.
Aaron, coolest spot, because I know you're a runner a little bit like me, that you've done either a marathon, a half marathon. Where's the coolest place?
Yeah, the Orange County one. It is incredible. It's in Costa Mesa. It runs along the coast. You go through neighborhoods. You're running close to the beach. The scenery is absolutely incredible.
Jen, the most famous Oklahoma State alumnus is?
Garth Brooks.
Thought you might say Barry Sanders.
Got to go with Garth.
Else, but Aaron, bigger Missouri rival? Kansas, Arkansas, or somebody
Kansas,
else?
Without a doubt.
I appreciate you both being on today. As I said, I think a lot of what you shared is going to be helpful, not just for anyone in a position of leadership who might have to go through hiring and onboarding and building culture and firing, but anybody who's thinking leadership is something that they are interested in. I hope, A, you're finding the content that I'm sharing and feedback people like Jen and Aaron are providing helpful, but just continue to reach out to other people that are in roles that you hope to one day hold. And I really encourage you to try to have some conversations and develop relationships there, because I think those, again, are some of the best things that I've seen high performers do that then allow them, when they get into that position one day, to be that much more successful. Thank you both again for being guests today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, appreciate you having us.
Mission Admissions is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a number of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admission professionals find their next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Allison Tercio, Day Cabilds, and so many other amazing leaders in the higher ed space. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create more meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. You can learn more at element451.com.